This is the story of the deadliest inn in America, where hospitality itself became a weapon, and where four sisters transformed the act of welcoming into a lethal art. It is a tale buried deep within the Kentucky mountains for over a century, until a surveyor working for the railroad uncovered a truth that would change everything. Margaret Cunningham, the eldest at 26 in the year 1831, possessed the sharp mind of a natural entrepreneur and the cold, calculating nature that would ultimately prove fatal. When their father died of tuberculosis, leaving the four daughters orphaned on an isolated mountain property, Margaret perceived opportunity where others would have seen only despair. The inn they inherited stood in a strategic position along Wilderness Road, the primary route leading into Kentucky and the Western Territories. Travelers depended upon safe havens along this dangerous path, and the Cunningham sisters quickly established a reputation for remarkable hospitality. Catherine, at 24, had inherited her mother's ethereal beauty and carried an almost supernatural gift: the ability to make any man feel as though he were the most important person in the world. Sarah, aged 22, shared her late mother's knowledge of Appalachian medicinal herbs, yet her studies soon stretched far beyond healing. With scientific precision, she devoted herself to understanding poisonous plants, learning the exact doses that could kill, and the methods by which symptoms could be disguised to make death appear natural. Elizabeth, the youngest at only 16, possessed an innocent charm that could disarm even the most suspicious traveler. Her apparent youth and seemingly naive nature offered perfect cover for the family's sinister undertakings. Together, the sisters perfected a system that was almost impossible to detect. Their ideal target was a man who traveled alone, carried substantial funds, had few family connections, and followed no fixed schedule that might raise alarm should he fail to arrive at his destination. Margaret, with her practiced eye, could identify such men the very moment they approached the inn. The first victim was Thomas Kellerman, a cattle buyer from Richmond who arrived in November of 1832. Kellerman was a recent widower who traveled alone, carrying a substantial pouch of gold coins intended for livestock purchases in Kentucky. At 45 years of age, childless and with few close connections, he represented precisely the type of guest the sisters would learn to identify with terrifying accuracy. For 3 days, the sisters provided Kellerman with an experience unlike anything he had ever encountered at an inn. Sarah's meals were lavish banquets that featured perfectly seasoned game, fresh bread, and her celebrated honey cakes. Margaret engaged him in lengthy discussions about business and politics, offering him the respect of an intellectual equal. Elizabeth's innocent laughter at his stories gave him a sense of worldly importance. However, it was Catherine who delivered what Kellerman longed for most of all: the illusion of romance. On the second night, she found him sitting alone by the fire, gazing into the flames with the hollow expression of a man who had lost everything that gave his life meaning. She approached carrying 2 glasses of Sarah's spiced rum, each one warmed and presented in crystal goblets that reflected the firelight. For 2 hours, Kellerman spoke with raw honesty to the beautiful woman, who listened with a convincing appearance of genuine attention. He spoke of his late wife, Mary, of his painful inability to have children, and of returning each evening to a silent home that still carried the faint fragrance of her lavender soap. "Loneliness is a terrible thing," Catherine said softly as the fire burned low, "but it does not have to last forever." Kellerman departed 3 days later with the intention of returning to Millbrook Inn on his way back to Richmond. However, Thomas Kellerman would never complete his journey to Kentucky. His horse was discovered 3 days later, wandering riderless near Cumberland Gap. Kellerman himself had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a mystery that would never receive official investigation. Hinrich Zimmer, one of the German immigrant workers employed on the property, lay in wait within the woods half a kilometer from the inn on the morning of Kellerman's departure. With deadly precision, the blacksmith's hammer struck the base of Kellerman's skull. His body was quickly wrapped in canvas and buried at a pre-selected location deep within the mountain forest, while his substantial pouch of gold coins was returned to Millbrook Inn. That evening, the 4 sisters sat around the kitchen table, counting Kellerman's wealth and contemplating their future. Margaret performed the calculations. The sum they had just acquired surpassed the inn's legitimate annual profits. Catherine had demonstrated that lonely men could be manipulated with disturbing ease. Sarah had proven that traces of evidence could be eliminated through chemistry and wilderness knowledge. Elizabeth had revealed that even apparent innocence could conceal terrible secrets. "He will not be missed for weeks," Margaret stated coldly as she stacked the gold coins with deliberate precision. "No family, no close friends, traveling alone to a place where no one knows him. Perfect. It was almost too easy, Catherine replied, her face still carrying the same gentle expression she had worn while comforting her victim. "He would have given us anything we asked for." What the sisters discovered on that cold November night was something far more valuable than gold. They discovered how to make people disappear. The winter of 1832 gave them time to refine their methods and establish protocols that would sustain their activities for nearly 2 decades. Margaret, with her sharp business mind, developed a system for identifying suitable victims. The ideal target was a solitary traveler who carried substantial wealth, lacked close family ties, and had no fixed itinerary that might raise suspicion if he failed to arrive at his destination. Sarah expanded her expertise in mountain plants into detailed studies of toxins and their effects. Pokeweed berries, when properly prepared, could induce symptoms resembling cholera. Digitalis could bring about heart failure that appeared natural. Water hemlock could kill within hours while leaving minimal evidence. Behind the main house, she cultivated a concealed garden, where she grew these plants among legitimate herbs, creating a pharmaceutical arsenal disguised as a place of healing. Catherine perfected the art of emotional manipulation, mastering the ability to discern men's deepest needs and presenting herself as the answer to their loneliness. She studied each target carefully and adjusted her behavior accordingly. For the religious, she appeared devoutly spiritual. For the intellectual, she became a thoughtful conversationalist. For the grieving, she embodied compassion and solace. Elizabeth remained essential to the success of their enterprise. Her truly innocent appearance provided impeccable cover for the family's crimes. Even the most cautious guests found it impossible to maintain suspicion toward a girl who seemed incapable of deceit. She also served as the sisters' early warning system, her youthful presence disarming suspicion before it had the chance to grow. Elizabeth's naturally friendly demeanor allowed her to gather information about guests' backgrounds, travel plans, and financial situations without arousing the slightest suspicion. The logistics of body disposal had been arranged with German efficiency by the Zimmer brothers. Cluse discovered a series of natural caves within the mountainside, accessible only through a concealed entrance hidden behind a rock slide. Corpses could be carried there under cover of darkness and sealed behind loose stones, where the mountain's natural chemistry accelerated decomposition. Between 1834 and 1845, Millbrook Inn earned a reputation that spread across the mid-Atlantic region and beyond. Outwardly, the sisters expanded their legitimate enterprises with remarkable success. The inn maintained a stable of quality horses for guests, operated a small distillery that produced premium mountain whiskey, and even offered guided hunting expeditions led by Ezra Hawthorne, their loyal foreman. Yet beneath this veneer of prosperity existed a carefully orchestrated system of murder that functioned with the precision of clockwork. During this period, they claimed the lives of approximately 43 victims. Each killing was meticulously planned and executed according to strict protocols designed to minimize risk while maximizing profit. Consider the case of Jonathan Waverly, a surveyor from Pennsylvania, who arrived in September of 1838. Waverly was engaged in mapping work for the state government, a task that demanded solitary travel through remote areas for extended months. He carried valuable surveying instruments, along with payment for his services and funds intended for purchasing land parcels he had identified as promising investments. Margaret immediately recognized Waverly as an ideal target. His profession required long absences from civilization, which meant that his disappearance might remain unnoticed for months. Furthermore, his surveying activities provided an ideal explanation should anyone inquire. It would be easy to assume that he had perished due to natural hazards while working alone in dangerous terrain. The sisters began their campaign without delay. Sarah prepared elaborate meals featuring game that Waverly had watched Ezra hunt, thereby creating a powerful connection between his food and the rugged mountain environment he so admired. Elizabeth conversed with him at length about his mapping work, expressing sincere fascination with his technical expertise and making him feel valued for his knowledge. However, it was Catherine who ultimately sealed Waverly's fate. She did not approach him as a romantic conquest, but rather as a kindred spirit who shared his love for the wilderness. She spoke with apparent authority about the mountain's flora and fauna, knowledge she had supposedly gathered through years of observation, but which, in truth, came directly from her studies of poisonous plants. "I have never met a woman who understood the mountains the way you do," Waverly admitted during one of their excursions, his professional reserve beginning to erode. "Most people only see wilderness, but you see the beauty and the order beneath it." "I have lived here my entire life," Catherine replied, stepping closer as they stood upon a cliff overlooking the valley. "The mountains have taught me lessons that books never could. Lessons about life, about death, and about the fragile balance between them. Waverley extended his intended 2-day visit into 3 full weeks, claiming that he required additional time to conduct more thorough surveying of the area. In truth, he remained because he had fallen entirely under Catherine's spell. During this period, Sarah gradually introduced increasingly potent toxins into his meals, crafting symptoms that mirrored the early stages of mountain fever. The poison Sarah employed on Waverley was her own innovation, a concentrated extract derived from Death Angel mushrooms that induced liver failure over several days. The symptoms perfectly resembled those of mountain fever, so much so that even an experienced physician would have been unable to distinguish between the two conditions. Waverley's death appeared to all as a tragic, yet entirely believable, occupational hazard. His surveying instruments were discreetly sold to a trader in Kentucky, while his meticulously drawn maps became part of Margaret's expanding collection of intelligence concerning the region's geography and natural resources. The brilliance of the sisters' operation rested not only in their methods of murder, but also in their remarkable ability to preserve the illusion of absolute respectability. They faithfully attended church services in nearby Millbrook, donated generously to community causes, and nurtured friendships with local families. Margaret served on the board of the Regional Merchants Association, while Sarah offered medical assistance to neighboring farms during times of illness. By approximately 1845, the Cunningham sisters had risen to become some of the wealthiest landowners in Western Virginia. Their public reputation was celebrated as a testament to what determined women could achieve in the unforgiving environment of the American frontier. Local newspapers occasionally published articles about the industrious Cunningham sisters, heralding them as remarkable women who had built a thriving commercial enterprise from their modest inheritance. However, the beginning of the end did not arise from law enforcement officials or suspicious relatives. It emerged from an entirely unexpected source, one of their own employees. Hinrich Timmer, the younger of the 2 German brothers, had grown increasingly unstable following a hunting accident in the autumn of 1849. The injury left him in unrelenting pain, which drove him to depend heavily upon laudanum for relief. The crisis reached its breaking point on a bitter February morning in 1850, when Hinrich staggered to the main house and appeared at the kitchen door. His eyes were wild with drug-induced terror, and his clothing was disheveled from a sleepless night. "I cannot do this any longer," Hinrich whispered, his voice trembling with anguish. "I see their faces every night. Whenever I close my eyes, they are there, watching me. 43 men, Sarah, 43 souls crying out for justice." Sarah remained outwardly calm, but her mind raced with cold calculation. She instantly recognized the magnitude of the threat Hinrich now posed. His knowledge of their crimes was absolute. He could identify burial sites, describe their methods of execution, and deliver testimony that would condemn all 4 sisters to the gallows. "You are not well, Hinrich," Sarah said gently, moving closer with an expression of apparent concern. "The laudanum is clouding your mind. You are seeing visions that are not real." "No," Heinrich's voice rose sharply, carrying a dangerous edge. "I know what we did. I know what you made me do, and I know that it must end." That night, Hinrich Zimmer died quietly in his sleep. His death was attributed to the same heart condition that had supposedly claimed the lives of several guests over the years. Sarah had prepared a special dinner for the Zimmer brothers, a gesture of appreciation for their years of loyal service, she had told Klaus. The wine was laced with a lethal concentration of digitalis extract, more than enough to still a man's heart within hours. The final guest to perish at Millbrook Inn was Samuel Hartwell, a cotton broker from Savannah, who arrived in March of 1851 with more than $1,000 in gold coins and banknotes. Hartwell, a widower in his 50s, was traveling north to negotiate contracts with textile mills in Pennsylvania. Yet Hartwell's death marked a pivotal moment, for the sisters made a grave error that would ultimately seal their fate. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, they had targeted a man whose absence would be noticed immediately. Hartwell had arranged to meet a business associate in Pittsburgh on a specific date, and when he failed to appear, his colleague began to make inquiries. Those inquiries eventually reached the desk of Sheriff Thomas Brennan of Millbrook County. Sheriff Brennan was a seasoned lawman with over 20 years of experience, but he had never encountered anything resembling the Cunningham sisters' operation. His initial investigation was routine, consisting of a few questions to confirm that Hartwell had lodged at the inn and departed in apparent good health. Yet Brennan's persistence exceeded that of previous investigators, and soon, he began to uncover troubling inconsistencies in the sisters' testimony. A blacksmith in a neighboring county recalled shoeing a horse that matched the description of Hartwell's mount, But the work had been performed several days after Hartwell was supposedly seen leaving the area. The raid on Millbrook Inn was executed at dawn on April 15, 1851. 8 armed deputies surrounded the property, cutting off any possibility of escape. The search of the main house revealed damning evidence: a silver pocket watch engraved with Samuel Hartwell's initials, a leather portfolio containing business documents belonging to Thomas Kellerman, and a collection of personal letters and photographs linked to dozens of missing men. The decisive breakthrough came with the discovery of the burial caves. Klaus, facing charges as an accessory to murder, led investigators to the hidden entrance behind the rock slide. Inside lay the skeletal remains of 43 men, accompanied by personal belongings worth thousands of dollars. The trial of the Cunningham sisters became one of the most sensational legal proceedings in the history of Virginia. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of a conspiracy that had spanned nearly 20 years and claimed more than 40 lives. Margaret maintained her innocence with unshaken composure. Catherine collapsed under the weight of testimony, swinging between outright denials and tearful confessions. Sarah remained entirely silent. Elizabeth, the youngest and most sympathetic of the defendants, pleaded that she had been coerced by her elder sisters and begged the court for mercy. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts for all 4 sisters on multiple counts of first-degree murder. Margaret, Catherine, and Sarah received death sentences, their execution scheduled for October 12, 1851. Elizabeth, spared the noose, was sentenced instead to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The executions were carried out on a bleak October morning before hundreds of spectators who had gathered to witness the end of the Cunningham legacy. Margaret faced her death with the same cold, unyielding composure she had displayed throughout the trial, offering no final words of remorse or explanation. And thus ended the story of Millbrook Inn, where hospitality became a weapon, and where 4 sisters discovered that making travelers feel welcome could be the most effective way to make them disappear forever. A chilling reminder that monsters do not always look like monsters. Sometimes they appear as gracious hostesses, smiling as they offer exactly what a weary traveler believes he needs most. So the next time you encounter hospitality that seems too perfect, remember the Cunningham sisters and the 43 men who believed they had found a home away from home, only to discover that death awaited them with a smile. If this story has fascinated you as deeply as it did me in the process of research, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and activate notifications. Many other dark mysteries from American history remain hidden, and I will be here to guide you through every shocking revelation. Until then, remain curious but remain cautious, for one never knows what secrets may lie behind a welcoming smile.